Hi, everyone. Welcome to our second YouTube Live. I hope you can all hear me well. If you have any questions as we go along, just pop them up in the chat. I've got the computer nice and close to me, so it's very easy for me to spot if there's anything coming in. I cannot as easily type and talk together. So Hannah, if you see Hannah Warren popping in, she's going to be jumping in and she will put any links or anything like that that you need. So just in case you're wondering who she is and what she's about, then that's who you're going to be seeing. So let me know today, where are you all coming from? Are you excited to get started with the Galanta knit along? I know I am really excited to get started with the first clue. It's always it is just a really, really fun part of the knit along because people have done the swatches, they're waiting, they're sitting there and they want to get their sweater on needles. So at this point, you probably have got your yarn. If you're joining the party a little bit late, do not worry. You can just grab the pattern and you get the first clue immediately. If you're somewhat close to me or if you're okay waiting a few days, we can still get yarn kits to you. But however, if you've got other yarn in your stash, or if you've got a local yarn shop you want to go into, then you can jump in there and get hold of some yarn that works. So the two ones that we have in the kit are Blasta, which is a DK weight yarn, but it's a heavy DK. And we have Newer worsted, which, as the name implies, it's a worsted weight. So you're going to want to get a heavy DK come worsted weight, and one that's happy being knit a little bit more loosely, because we're knitting it on 4.5mm needles. I believe that's probably US 7, and that is going to be knitted about 18 stitches over 4 inches or over 10 centimeters, which is fairly loose. So you have to have a yarn that's happy being knit a little bit looser than stated on the ball band. Now, I know I had somebody, when they looked at the actual the yarn, the gauge, and they went to try and go and do an Aran weight. But an Aran weight isn't going to be amazing because of the fact that it's going to be a little bit heavier and you're going to get a denser fabric. It can be done, but it is going to basically be a little bit it's going to basically be a slightly denser fabric. But yeah, please let me know if you're out there and where you're popping in from, and if you have any questions when you're starting off, whether it's about picking the size, or maybe it's in relation to the actual the stitch patterns and things like that you're using. But I will kind of talk through all of the different techniques that you're going to use and give you an idea on how to kind of figure out sizing. So the first thing is that there's a big range of sizes. And when you see in the sizing pattern, the very top, it'll say to fit up to this size. And that would kind of be the maximum bust size I would suggest that it fit. And the reason I've put that as the maximum bust size is I feel that you don't want this one to be terribly tight. So if you have less ease than that, then it's probably going to be a little bit snug fitting. If you like to determine the ease yourself, then you can pop down to the finished measurements at the bottom, and the finished measurements are going to give you the actual size that it is. So I knit both of these. I'll stand up in a minute so I can show you the different sizings. I knit both of these in different sizes to give you an idea of what different amounts of ease look like. So this is the 3rd size. And when I wear it, it's got several inches of ease. I've got it written into the pattern. I think it was probably, like in the photographs, about 4 inches of ease. And this one here is the vest, and the vest has got a little less ease, but they both fit me. They just fit me slightly differently. And with the vest, I actually thought that it worked quite well with a little bit less ease, because it's just because the way you're going to be wearing it. When you're probably like the way I've got it now, I've got a shirt under it, or you're going to have perhaps another layer that's going to be coming out. So a little bit smaller works pretty well with that, I think, if you've got if you can downsize for vests. But if you like more ease, then go up to this size for the vest option as well. You'll probably see that each of them are on a slightly shorter length size. They're not super cropped, but they're definitely a little shorter. I'm going to bring her up a bit closer here. So this is the faux cable stitch here. And it starts at the beginning where it's just worked flat. So you see it's just worked across like this. So with the stitch pattern, it's a multiple of 4 stitches plus 1 edge stitch. So for when you're working flat, it's going to be a multiple of floor plus 1, so that you've got an edge stitch here and the same stitch over on the other side, which will mean that it's going to be balanced out and nice and even. So you'll do that for the front and you'll do that for the back. And then when they're all finished, you join it together in the round. As you can probably see, when you've got 1 repeat here where you've got the full stitch pattern worked together. And with the full repeat like that, you're actually going to go ahead and decrease in the middle, because the fact that you've got an edge stitch at each end, and when you put the 2 sides together, you're not going to want 2 stitches. So you're going to decrease so that it joins bang up in the middle. Here is how that works. So that's how you get started with it. If you think you would like to have it whereby you don't want the split in the bottom here, then all you're going to want to do is kind of ignore the parts where it is straight on each side. So you've got you started with 1, 2, 3 repeats. Is that right? I think it's 3 repeats before you join in the round, and then you join in the round. But if you cast on here with the number of stitches that you need for joining in the round, but then work all of those repeats that you had when it was worked separately, it just means that you're going to have a wider section there where it's just joined together. And that isn't a problem. It works just fine, but you do need to make sure that you just make that long enough when you're working through. The body here, if I turn her around here, you can see this ends here, the stitch pattern ends here, but it steps all the way back here. You see you've got 2 columns are finished across here, and it comes all the way to the side, and it's mimicked on the back, so it's identical on the front and on the back, which means that it's very straightforward to be able to go and yeah, effectively have your panels on each side to be the very same. The stitch pattern is going to be slightly different or the stitch gauge is slightly different depending on whether you've got it the faux cable or for the stockinette stitch. So you'll decrease a little above each. And the only reason for that is so that you're trying to match the gauge and you don't have it flaring out when you've got the stockinette stitch. So that's the only reason that you would do that. And then the last big change you may want to put in is possibly adjust the length. If you do add length, be really careful that you've got enough extra yarn that you're not going to run out of yarn. Very, very important. And the other thing to do in terms of adding extra length is it'll also give you the opportunity of maybe adding in a little bit of waist shaping, because this one is worked straight down, which I think works when it's cropped. But if you add a little bit of extra length, you might possibly want to do a little bit of decreases at the waist and a little bit of increases up there. And where they go in will be determined on your own size, your body size, and where they're going to fit in. So for this, because you've got a lot of steps going here, you want to pull those in a little bit on each side in the front and in on each side on the back. So that means that it's going to allow you to have to keep it away from the shaping at the sides. I've got those directions in the pattern and the tips showing you kind of how the decreases will work both in the front and in the back. Usually, if you're doing that on the front, you'll bring it in about a quarter on each side. But when you do it on the back, let me turn her around. If you're doing it on the back, you'll generally bring it into about a third. And that it tends to kind of pinch it into the middle a little bit more. Whereas in the front, at about a quarter, it works better with bust lines and things like that. But you don't have to do any shaping like that. I kept it dead straight like this. It's just the options there if you do want to add things in. Now, I should probably also add that I've got a couple of different ways that you can join. You may have already joined, but if you're having difficulty accessing different things, I'll kind of try and go through things. The first one is that you want to get the pattern, the Galanta pattern, either on my website, Stolen Stitches, or on Ravelry. They're two slightly different versions with a small bit of information on the Ravelry one in relation to getting the workshops, because of the fact that it's not automated. If you buy from my website, you will automatically be enrolled into the Teachable workshops, and you'll get an email saying that you're enrolled. If you haven't got an account there before, you're going to have to set up the Teachable account. You just get a prompt when you go in, and then once you've got an account, you can just go straight up to your classes and you'll see your class listed there. You can go in and you can add comments onto the class. You can view all the videos if you want. If you want to download an individual video to watch offline, you can do that as well. So that's how you access the Teachable. KnitHub, where we're actually having most of our chat, you will also get an invitation to join KnitHub. It's got the very same login as Teachable, so it makes it very straightforward. But if you got it on Ravelry, you'll have that information in your in the actual PDF. But you'll go to the website that's listed. You'll need to create an account, and then you can actually pop in and go ahead and write your actual discount code that you've got in there. Now, I am wondering we've got a problem with the chat feature, because I'm not sure it seems to be working. So I'm just going to check to see. Nope, I don't know what's going on. It does appear if somebody can actually chat in there, because I know there's some of you on there, but I'm not sure if I've turned the chat on, and I'm a little concerned that I have done something funny when I set it up, whereby I hadn't got the chat enabled. I don't know, not that I can see. If you're able to chat, please let me know. Oh, hang on a second. I think I'm going to pop in, allow comments, and save. So hopefully that will allow people to actually pop comments on. If you can hear me, pop on and pop in a comment, because I am a little bit concerned that I may have done something funny when I set it up. Due to the fact that I haven't set an awful lot of Facebook live or YouTube lives, I am not quite used to the setup and all of the bells and whistles, and it's really possible that I've done something wrong. So if I have, I apologize. And if you have questions that you haven't had a chance to say while we're talking here because I have messed up the chat function, then just pop them up afterwards and I will reply to everything in the comments. In the meanwhile, I'll assume that, oh, the chat is showing for Hannah. Okay, that is really strange. I'm just not showing stuff here. I might have it listed up a bit strangely on the side. Aha, I see what the problem is. I had it showing the wrong setting up here. It says that I was only at the top messages showing rather than all of the live messages. So I'm going to talk and attempt to read because you have been chatting here and I've not been ignoring you. I just didn't see them. Stacy, you're excited to get started. Ah, fantastic. You got up half an hour early to cast on as well. Ah, fantastic. Audrey, Chattanooga, ready to cast on. See, I haven't been ignoring you all. I just didn't see them. Monica is from Michigan. Elsa Louise, nice to see you from Ontario. We've got Alexander from Newfoundland. Maryland, Michigan. Oh, you guys are great. Here was I wondering where everybody had disappeared. Well, I am very glad that I realized what was happening. Sometimes I feel a little bit thick. All right, perfect. If you do have any questions and I didn't see them, I've just been kind of scanning through, just let me know, please. I am a little bit woozy. I've spent the last 2 days up in Mallow teaching with Roan Tree Travel with the Longmont Yarn Shop. Anyone who's in there from Longmont Yarn Shop, you guys are amazing. I had so much fun for the last 2 days, but I'm definitely a little bit hyper and going to crash soon, I think. Next month, we've got the second half of the class coming because there was so many people wanted to come to Ireland. They needed to end up running 2 tours, which is very, very cool. But it was an awful lot of fun for the last couple of days. But yes, it doesn't mean that I'm a little bit all over the place. I do have yarn with me here as well that I was going to talk about. We've put up two of the sweater kits, these ones in for sweater kit options, the Quilta and also the Leah, because these have been out of stock for a while in our Blosta yarns. And we think they would make really good colors for the sweater. The Leah in particular is always a really popular color. And if I put this up here, see Quilta is just beautiful green, got a ton of nuance to it. And it takes a remarkable small amount of this yarn to knit up the vest. I think it's 2 or 3 skeins for the smallest size. It just knits up really, really fast. Um, Elsa Louise, you had a question. You're thinking of making the vest for your husband. He's got a 46-inch chest. What size do I suggest? Okay, for men's sweaters, I would usually go for a good 4 or 5 inches of positive ease. So you want to find, I don't have the sizings directly in front of me. Look for the finished bust size that is going to be kind of 50 to 52 inches. And that should be a good one for him. Do make sure you add a little bit of length to the body, and that probably actually has shoulders wide enough. But if it's a vest and it's a little bit narrower in the shoulders, that actually works out just fine as well. It doesn't cause too many problems. Karen, you won't be doing the split hem, but you're wondering would be okay to do the cable step on both sides. Absolutely. The only difference being is that, like we do, if you were doing the cable step on this side and this side, just make sure that you do the same set of decreases, because you won't be every time two of those cable columns are decreased, you decrease 1 stitch so that you can keep the stitch count correct for the stockinette stitch. When you're doing all of these decreased together, you can see that every 2 columns of these, there's a stitch decreased in the middle. So if you're not decreasing immediately, but doing in steps, just do those decreases as you're doing the steps up along, and and it will kind of make sense. So if basically you should end up by the time you hit your stockinette stitch with the same number of stitches, regardless of whether you're doing all of the decrease or the changes from your faux cable immediately, or if you're actually going to go and do it separately. But yeah, but it should, you can kind of play around with it. The fact that it's a pretty straightforward body shape means that it's quite modifiable, and it's also and I think actually it would make a really nice one for a men's vest or a men's sweater as well. You may possibly for the men's ones, I don't know if you want to put the split hem in. I might be more inclined to actually make a complete hem for the men's one together. I think that it might work better for the men's one without the split. In terms of cast on, I've actually left it up to you what you cast on. What I ended up using for this was a long tail one. You just want to make sure there's enough stretch in it, and this actually works quite nicely with the ribbing that you have here for your faux cable. So, like, take your pick. Once you've got enough stretch, any kind of cast on is going to be okay. Another question that came up from people when they were doing the faux cable and the swatching is, you can't see it very clearly. They were concerned that there was holes in it, and they are in fact meant to be there because you're doing a yarn over in the middle, so it does create a hole in the center here. So if I stretch this out, you can see that each of these faux cables does have a little hole up on the top here, because you're going to pass stitches over and you're creating a yarn over to create the new one. So there's going to be a little bit of a hole as you're going up, and that's fine. It's just not as visible when it's lying down and you're not up close to it. Um, but I'm trying to think what other things might trip you up. The other thing that I found that I've put in and that I was working through most of the stitch pattern is I made ample use of stitch markers. So every one of these, as I was going through, I made sure to move the stitch marker across here. So when I did those decreases, I moved the stitch marker over to here. And then once I did those, I moved the stitch marker over there. And you can see as well, the stitch pattern in the round initially starts with just the knit stitches. So as you're moving up here, you're also introducing a purl stitch just in front. Because initially I didn't have that purl stitch in. I just had the stitch happening from the faux cable, but it really wasn't popping out. It needed that purl stitch at the start so that the actual panel itself stood out and became very obvious. And actually a very interesting conversation with somebody today. We were talking about garter stitch in the class, and we were talking about how I said, oh, when you are not garter stitch and also purl rips, because normally in something like this, when you've got vertical panels of knits, whether it's cable or something else, and purl next to it, the purl sinks to the background and the knit stands out. But if you've got garter stitch and you're doing a line of purl, it's the opposite. It stands out. And so while I knew how it behaved, I had never described it or talked through why there was a difference. And it's the band of garter stitch versus a column of stitches which sink into the background. And it's particularly, I suppose, obvious when you're doing something like this where it's being worked in the round and you're looking at the front side for every row. Monica, how much yarn do you figure in for the swatch? You're doing the vest, the second size, and you have 7 skeins, but you're always afraid you might run out. Okay, so what we do when I'm calculating the yarn amounts is I'll take how much my sweater or whatever piece I'm working on weighs, and I will then add in a factor of 10% over that in order to cover yourself. So basically, if something took 500 yards, I will then take 10% of that, which is another 50 yards, and that's is that yes, that's right. And so the estimate I will give will be 550 yards. Usually that's enough to do a couple of things. It will allow you to have a little bit extra for swatching and also take account of some gauge differences because everyone's gauge is going to be a little bit different. Also, you might notice, the way, because we're doing things with skeins, like particularly for Blosta, but because there's a certain amount, if you see that one set of sizings goes from the 5 skeins up to 6 skeins, if you're in that first size that is 6 skeins, you're going to have a lot of extra yarn because you've probably just tipped into the 6 skeins if the previous size is 5. But the opposite actually happens as well. So if you've got one that's 5, then you've got maybe 3 sizes that are 6 and the next is 7. That final one that's 6 is probably just about fitting in and is using the whole of the 6. So the answer is, if you take a look at the yardage for each different size and see where you are, and you can see if you've got loads of extra based on the yardage of the skeins, or if you've just got the 10% extra. And the other thing as well is, you can weigh with things like the skeins, you can kind of double check the weight as well. Nua will often have a couple of extra grams in it, but I assume that it doesn't, obviously, because I have to assume that these are just 50 grams, but some of them may be 55 grams. They tend to be more heavier weight than lighter weight. Blosta tends to be generally a little closer to 100. Sometimes you might have 1 or 2 over, sometimes it might be 1 or 2 less. So you can actually even double check and weigh your skeins as well, and that might will make you realize that you could have overall with them all together exactly what it says, or you might be a little over, a little under. So just get an electronic scale and you can kind of make a guesstimate yourself that way also. In terms of swatching, sometimes with swatching people run into problems or get a bit worried if they don't get gauge with one and they have to swatch again and worrying about running out of yarn. If you've done a swatch, you don't get match the gauge and you want, and you've blocked it and you've redone it again, I would actually say, if you're concerned about it, just rip it out. You can actually even, like, some, the way when you've got it out in a hank, if you just get something where you can stretch it out like that, wind it open, steam it with a steam iron, a steamer, it'll relax the kinks and you can actually reuse that swatch yarn again quite comfortably. You can even, if you want to get a bit more complicated, you can even tie it up, you can soak it, you can put tiny little bit of weight in it, just basically to get the kinks out again. I will be the first to admit that I have sometimes gone ahead and used yarn that has been ripped out, even with a little bit of kinks. And if it's just slightly so, I haven't noticed any problems. Some yarn hold those kinks a bit more dramatically, in which case you could notice a slight difference in the bumpiness, and it might cause a bit of a distortion in stockinette stitch, in which case steaming the yarn out or stretching it in some way can be quite helpful. But yeah, don't have any qualms about reusing swatch yarn as well if you're kind of concerned at the end. You've got a question. Is your first bottom up garment and you need to check length as you go using DK yarn? Is there a way to try it on, or should you simply fit it to another finished garment? You can try it on, and there's a couple of ways you can kind of judge it. So first of all, take a look at your size on the schematic, and it'll tell you how far from the edge of your shoulder down to here. So it'll give you that depth. So you can actually even go and measure from like the top of your shoulder here down to somewhere here. Just put a pin in here. And so then if you take your yarn, your body, which is just going to be on your single needle, and you can then use a barber cord, second needle, or some waste yarn to stretch it out. And then you can hold it up, and you can actually hold it up to wherever you've got that marker telling you how deep that upper part is. So it means that you can have a good idea based on the upper part of the body where that body is going to finish. So you should be able to try it on exactly the same way. It just means that you need to take into account this top part. And remember that you can actually even modify a little as you're going. If you find that, oh, the armholes are getting too big, you can finish this sooner, but you can try it on exactly the same way. In fact, I have been known to, when I'm trying something like this on, lift the back up and just even pin it on as I'm doing the front so that I can match it up to make sure I know where it's lying. So you can make just as many adjustments. You just need to check when you're doing the body before you divide how far down this is going to go, but that will all be on the schematics. So schematics are kind of magic because of the fact that they tell you the exact numbers of all the different parts as you're going. So just make use of those. Or if you know you want to lengthen the upper body, add that little bit of length on, and you can check how that looks like with the rest of it. You want some clarification in the faux knit pattern. Is the purl only at the beginning and end of the row? Or is it the fifth stitch of the pattern? So if you're knitting it flat, what you've got is it's a 4-stitch repeat, and the final one is at the end. So there's only going to be, so you'll have one knit stitch, then one purl stitch. This is worked flat, obviously. 3 knit, that will become the faux, and then you work the repeat again, where it's going to be the purl, the 3 knit. So if you've printed it out, it's actually possible that you didn't print it with the repeat. So there should be a red box around those 4 stitches. So those 4 stitches are repeated, and then that final stitch, which is a purl stitch, is coming at the very end. So 4-stitch repeat to the very last stitch where you have the 1 purl stitch. If you're ever in doubt with stuff like that, you can also just even check the written directions, which should show you where the repeats are. And then it becomes a little bit different when you're working it in the round. It doesn't have, because for this section here it's going all the way around, so you're starting with the 3 knit stitches, ending with the purl stitch, and then the only place we start reintroducing a purl at the start outside the pattern is just for these ones here. So hopefully that answered your question. If you need more clarification, just pop it up there and let me know. But I think that probably has, I hope it's covered a lot of the questions that are coming up. I am, of course, in KnitHub. Because I've been in and out today, I haven't gone in yet and answered any questions, but Emer is also inside there, and she has been working on the test knit with the pattern, and she's worked through it before, so she knows it pretty well. And if I'm not able to jump in immediately, she will definitely be there. I'm going to be traveling, teaching most of next week. So during the day, I won't be able to see questions, so it'll be gathering them up at the end of the day. And anything that Emer doesn't have an answer for, I'll be sure to jump in. But it won't be as quick as usual next week because I won't be at my computer. I'll be talking to people down in Kerry. Two classes, a retreat and a individual class on Monday morning. So we're in teaching territory at the moment. Everybody wants to learn in September. It's the time for tourism retreats and people to come to Ireland. So we've nice blue skies outside, a little bit cold in the morning, but kind of perfect for coming on a knitting holiday. Once we don't have too many storms, we'll all be good. I hope that answered all your questions. If you have any more, just put them into the comments here and they will all come to me. I'll answer them as we go along. If you haven't started yet, then get your needles out and and have fun with it. You'll find it all on our website, Stolen Stitches, the Galanta Knit Along. If you want to learn more about how the knit alongs in general work, then just jump onto our knit along page. You'll find it in one of the drop down menus at the start, and that will give you a step-by-step on the process of how we work our knit alongs, because every designer, every yarn shop, everyone does knit along slightly differently. So our process, if you've done it before, you've probably learned how it works, but if you're new to it, then all the information should be there. And there's both me, lots of people working here to help you, and there's some great knitters out there that will help you along the way. Just looking. You're heading my way next week for a cruise. You hope to stop for a visit. Excellent. I won't be in the studio, but you will see either Laura or Max, who will be in all of next week. So there'll be someone to mind you if you make it to the shop. You're working on row 3 as you watch. Fantastic. I enjoy. I found this a very addictive knit. This was my holiday knit when I was away in Costa Rica. This was the one that I was working on. So I started these on as we worked through, and then I did the vest version on camera when I came back. But bottom up is particularly satisfying when you're in holidays, because you get to the point where once you've got all the interesting bits done, you can kind of knit away and talk with people. So it's a good holiday travel knit. So if any of you are traveling, get the bottom part started, and then you can fly away on the body and talk to people at the same time. So have a wonderful week. I will be back here in 2 weeks' time. It will be back at the 2:30 time for our Zoom. Sorry, not Zoom. The YouTube live will be on here again, because I do like this format. It's easy to see people's questions. You can see what's going on. They get saved afterwards, so you can, it's just much easier to follow as we go through. But it was just a little later today because I was out teaching. But it will be 2:30, 2 weeks time on here, and I will see you. And remember, you can just click the notification. If you are following me on YouTube, you will automatically get a notification. So it makes life very easy. You don't have to worry about the time difference, because YouTube will do all of the work for you. All right. Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining me.